My son and his wife said they were taking me for a quick health checkup on Christmas morning, just to be safe. They left me in a hospital gown in a chaotic year and never came back. They just wanted me out of the way for their fancy party in my home. They thought they had discarded me, just another old woman in the way. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know, I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Cynthia Jenkins, and at 70 years old, I had come to believe that the greatest joys in life were the small, predictable rituals. The first sip of morning coffee, the unfurling of a new rosebud in my garden, and above all the familiar chaotic warmth of my family gathering in my home for our annual Christmas dinner. For weeks, my house had been a symphony of preparation. The scent of pine from the towering tree in the corner mingled with the rich aroma of gingerbread and cinnamon. The good silver, my mother's before me, was polished to a brilliant shine. I had spent 2 days slow cooking a brisket, preparing the collard greens from my own garden, and baking the sweet potato pies that were my son Derek's absolute favorite. Derek, my son of 45, had always been a good boy, if a little easily swayed. His wife, Tasha, however, was a different matter. At 42, Tasha was a woman who moved through the world with a sharp, brittle energy, her life a carefully curated performance of success and sophistication. She was a woman who valued appearances above all else, and I, her simple retired school principal mother-in-law, had long suspected I did not fit her desired aesthetic. Their visits had become less about connection and more about inspection. Tasha's eyes would sweep over my comfortable, well-loved furniture with a faint, almost imperceptible sneer. She'd make comments about my charming but dated decor, about the potential the house had if it were properly modernized. Derek, caught between his wife's ambition and his mother's traditions, would just offer a weary, placating smile. This year, Tasha had insisted on inviting her own family and a number of Derek's important work colleagues to my house for Christmas dinner. "We need to make a good impression, Cynthia," she'd said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "It's a crucial year for Derek's career." So I had planned for a larger crowd, my heart a little heavy with the knowledge that my quiet family dinner was being co-opted into a networking event, but willing to do anything to support my son. On the morning of the holiday, as the final pies were cooling on my counter, they arrived earlier than expected. Their faces were set with a strange, rehearsed seriousness that immediately set my nerves on edge. "Mom," Derek began, avoiding my gaze, his hands fidgeting in his pockets. "Tasha and we've been a little worried about you." "Worried?" I asked, my hands still dusted with flour. "About what, dear?" Tasha stepped forward, placing a cold, perfectly manicured hand on my arm. Her smile was a masterpiece of false sympathy. "Cynthia, you've been working so hard for this dinner. And you mentioned your blood pressure was a little high at your last checkup. We just think before all the excitement and the stress of hosting so many people, it would be wise to get a quick precautionary checkup at the hospital. Just to be safe." I stared at them. A hospital? On Christmas morning? A checkup? Tasha, it's Christmas. My blood pressure's perfectly fine. I feel wonderful. "But you don't know that for sure," Derek chimed in, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "What if something happened during dinner? We'd never forgive ourselves." "It's just for an hour or two, Mom. We'll take you to the ER, they'll run a quick EKG, check your pressure, and we'll have you back here long before the turkey is even carved. Please, Mom. For our peace of mind." Their combined insistence, their performance of overwhelming concern, was so convincing, so absolute, that to refuse would have seemed churlish, almost irrational. They were worried about me, they said. They were just trying to take care of me. Against my better judgment, against the quiet alarm bell ringing in the back of my mind, I relented. I, a retired principal who had managed a school of 1,000 students, was being treated like a fragile, unpredictable child who couldn't be trusted with her own health on a holiday. "All right," I sighed, wiping my hands on my apron. "If it will make you feel better. But let's be quick. The guests will be arriving at 4. The emergency room was a controlled chaos of beeping machines, hurried footsteps, and the low murmur of pain and worry. It was no place for a healthy 70-year-old woman on Christmas Day. They settled me into a cubicle, a thin curtain my only privacy. A tired-looking nurse took my vitals. "We'll be right back, Mom," Derek said, his hand briefly on my shoulder. Just have to go move the car and make a few calls. We'll be in the waiting room. They helped me into a rough, scratchy hospital gown, took my coat, my purse, my phone for safekeeping at the nurse's station. And then they were gone. I sat on the edge of the gurney. The cold air of the ER a stark contrast to the warm, festive aroma of my home. I waited. And waited. An hour passed. Then my quick precautionary checkup was turning into a long, lonely vigil. And the knot of unease in my stomach was beginning to feel a lot like dread. The emergency room on Christmas Day is a place of stark, unvarnished human drama. A place I had no business being. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the low thrum of anxiety. I sat in my curtained cubicle, a small, forgotten island in a sea of genuine crisis. A young man with a broken arm was moaning softly in the next bay. A child with a high fever was crying fitfully down the hall. And I, Cynthia Jenkins, was perfectly healthy, a fraudulent patient in a flimsy hospital gown, my heart aching with a growing, terrible suspicion. My quick EK had been performed hours ago, a young, tired-looking doctor confirming what I already knew. My heart was as steady and as strong as ever. My blood pressure, ironically, was a little elevated, but she'd attributed it to situational stress. "Your son and daughter-in-law are in the waiting room?" she'd asked, glancing at my chart. "I'll let them know you're all clear to go home." But they didn't come. 3 o'clock came and went. The time I was supposed to be taking my perfectly brown turkey out of the oven. Then 4 o'clock, the time my guests, their important guests, were scheduled to arrive at my home. I pictured them now, walking into my beautifully decorated living room, the Christmas tree twinkling, the table laden with food. And me, the hostess, the matriarch, absent. My calls to Derek and Tasha from the phone in my cubicle went straight to a voicemail box that was, conveniently, full. The nurses at the main desk were kind but increasingly busy with real emergencies. "They said they were in the waiting room, Mrs. Jenkins," one of them told me, her face a mask of professional sympathy. "I'm sure they'll be back for you shortly." But they weren't in the waiting room. A kind orderly, taking pity on me, had gone to check. "No one there by that name, ma'am," he'd reported back gently. "The waiting room is almost empty." The truth, cold and sharp and brutal, finally pierced through my last vestiges of denial. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't them losing track of time. This was deliberate. This was their plan. They had lied to me, created a fake medical pretext, and dumped me in the one place they knew I couldn't easily leave. A place where my protests would be dismissed as the confusion of an elderly patient. They had abandoned me here in this cold, chaotic place so they could have my home, my food, my festive stage, all to themselves without the burden of my presence. The word Tasha had used last week echoed in my mind. We had been discussing the seating arrangement for the big dinner. I had assumed I would sit at the head of my own table. Tasha had exchanged a quick, strange look with Derek. "Well, Cynthia," she'd said, "with so many of Derek's important colleagues coming, we need to make sure the main table's dynamic is just right. You know how you get tired. We don't want you to feel overwhelmed or stuck if you want to leave early. You're a bit in the way of the flow we're trying to create." In the way. That's what I was to them. Not the loving mother, not the proud hostess, but an obstacle. An inconvenient piece of old furniture that cluttered up their perfect party. And this hospital gown, this cold gurney, this humiliating, unnecessary confinement, this was their solution. Tears of pure, impotent fury stung my eyes. I thought of my grandchildren who would be asking where their grandma was. What lies were they being told? That I was sick? That I had forgotten? I thought of my friends, the few I had managed to invite, arriving at my home to find me absent, with my smirking daughter-in-law playing the lady of the manor. The humiliation was a physical thing, a burning in my chest. As the evening wore on, the ER grew even more chaotic. A car accident brought in a flurry of activity, and my quiet cubicle was all but forgotten by the overstretched staff. I was alone, truly alone, on Christmas Day, a prisoner of my children's callousness. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night when a new doctor came on shift. She was young, with bright, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense air about her. Her name tag read, Dr. Aisha Barnes. She came into my cubicle, her brow furrowed as she looked at my chart, then at me. "Mrs. Cynthia Jenkins?" she asked, her voice a mixture of confusion and concern. "My chart says you were admitted this morning for a precautionary checkup and cleared for discharge almost 9 hours ago." Is there a reason you're still here? Are you waiting for a ride? I looked at this sharp, compassionate young woman, and the dam of my carefully maintained composure finally broke. My children, I whispered, my voice hoarse with unshed tears. My son and his wife. They brought me here this morning. They said I was in the way of their Christmas party. And they never came back. The look on Dr. Barnes's face shifted from professional concern to a deep human outrage. She sat down on the small stool in my cubicle, her gaze never leaving mine. She had seen, I realized, a great deal in this emergency room. But the story of my quiet, cruel abandonment on Christmas Day had clearly struck a nerve. The story wasn't over. A new, unexpected chapter was about to begin. Dr. Aisha Barnes listened. She didn't just hear the words I spoke. She listened with an intensity and empathy that felt like a warm blanket being wrapped around my chilled, shivering soul. In that sterile, curtained-off cubicle, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room, I told her everything. Not just about the Christmas Day abandonment, but about the weeks leading up to it. My son Derek's growing distance, my daughter-in-law Tasha's subtle, cutting remarks, their constant insinuations that I was a burden, an obstacle to the grand, important lives they were trying to build. I told her how they had called me in the way. Her face as I spoke was a study in controlled fury. As a doctor, she was trained to be objective, detached. But as a human being, as a woman, she was clearly appalled. They just left you here? She asked, her voice a low, incredulous murmur. On Christmas Day? So they could have a party? I nodded, a fresh wave of shame washing over me. They said it was a precautionary checkup, I whispered. A lie, of course. A cruel, convenient lie. Dr. Barnes was silent for a long moment, her sharp, intelligent eyes taking in my hospital gown, my worn-out slippers, the profound weariness etched onto my face. I could see the gears turning in her mind, the professional outrage mingling with a deeper, more personal indignation. She told me later that my story was tragically not entirely unique. She had seen it before, this quiet, insidious form of elder abandonment, especially around the holidays. Families, wanting an unencumbered celebration, would bring their elderly parents to the ER with a vague, non-urgent complaint, knowing the system would be forced to care for them for a day or two, a free, temporary nursing home. But my story, the sheer, calculated cruelty of it, had struck a particular chord. Mrs. Jenkins, she said finally, her voice firm, resolute. This is more than just a family dispute. This is neglect. This is emotional abuse. And it is utterly, completely unacceptable. She took a deep breath. I have to be honest with you. I run a small, social media account. A blog, a video channel. It's anonymous, I never use real names or details that could identify my patients. I started it to share stories from the ER, to highlight the things people don't see, the systemic problems, the moments of grace, the moments of injustice. She looked at me directly, her gaze unwavering. Your story, Mrs. Jenkins, it's a powerful one. It shines a light on a dark corner that too many people ignore. With your permission, and I mean only with your absolute willing permission, I would like to share an anonymized version of it. I wouldn't use your name, your children's names, not even the city. I would just tell the story of a dignified, retired principal who was left in my ER on Christmas Day because her family said she was in the way. I believe it could make a difference. I believe it could make people listen. I stared at her, my mind reeling. My private, profound humiliation shared with the world? The thought was terrifying. But then I thought of Derek and Tasha, so confident in their cruelty, so certain that their secret was safe, that I was a powerless old woman they could discard at will. I thought of other women, other men, perhaps sitting in other ERs, other lonely rooms, feeling the same crushing weight of being deemed a burden. The anger, the righteous fury that had been simmering beneath my grief found its focus. Yes, I said, my voice stronger now. Yes, doctor. You have my permission. Tell them what they did. Dr. Barnes nodded, a grim but determined look on her face. I will, she said. Her first priority, however, was me. She made a few sharp, efficient phone calls. She spoke to the hospital's on-call social worker, outlining my situation, flagging it officially as a case of social abandonment. She arranged for a hospital transport service to take me home the next morning, ensuring I would not have to make a humiliating call to my children for a ride. She made sure the social worker would be following up with me to discuss my safety and my rights. She didn't just offer sympathy, she offered a plan, a shield. That night, before her shift ended, she came back to my cubicle one last time. She had her phone in her hand. She had already written a short script, a powerful, concise recounting of my story. She read it to me, her voice filled with a quiet, controlled anger. It was perfect. It was my truth, distilled to its most potent, undeniable essence. "I'll post it tonight," she said softly. "You get some rest, Mrs. Jenkins. You are not in the way. You are a survivor. And tomorrow a lot more people are going to know that." As she left, leaving me in the quiet of my small, curtained space, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't happiness, not yet. But it was hope. A dangerous, fragile, but fiercely welcome hope. My children had tried to silence me, to make me invisible. They had no idea that their cruel act had just handed me a microphone, and a powerful, unexpected ally who was about to turn the volume all the way up. The next morning, Boxing Day, I was driven home in a quiet, comfortable hospital transport van, the arrangements all made by the social worker Dr. Barnes had called. I felt a profound sense of relief as I put my own key in my own front door, leaving the sterile, chaotic world of the hospital behind. My house was a mess. The remnants of my children's Christmas feast were still on the dining room table, plates piled high, wine glasses stained, a testament to their joyous celebration in my absence. A wave of anger and sorrow washed over me, but it was different now. It was no longer the helpless grief of a victim. It was the cold, clarifying anger of a woman whose story was about to be told. I spent the morning cleaning, my movements slow but deliberate, reclaiming my space. With every plate I washed, every crumpled napkin I threw away, I felt a layer of my humiliation being stripped away, replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. Around noon, my old landline phone began to ring. It was my sister Martha, her voice frantic. "Cynthia, are you all right? I just saw, oh Cynthia, my heavens, I just saw the most incredible thing online. Everyone is sharing it." "Sharing what, Martha?" I asked calmly, though my heart had begun to beat a little faster. "This video. From some young doctor. She's telling a story about a woman, a retired principal, whose children left her in the ER on Christmas Day. Everyone is saying it must have happened right here in our city. It's all over the community pages. People are absolutely furious. They're calling it a disgrace." It had begun. I didn't have a social media account myself, but I didn't need one. The story, as Dr. Barnes had unleashed it, had taken on a life of its own. It was a simple video, I later learned. Just Dr. Barnes speaking directly to her camera at the end of her long Christmas shift, her face tired but her eyes blazing with righteous indignation. She never used my name, never mentioned the hospital, but she told my story with a powerful, gut-wrenching clarity. She spoke of a dignified 70-year-old woman, a respected educator, tricked into coming to the ER for a checkup. She recounted how the woman's children had vanished, how they had been hosting a party in the woman's own home while she sat alone and forgotten for over 9 hours. She used the phrase that would become the heart of the firestorm. Her family told her she was in the way. The video exploded. Dr. Barnes's account, usually followed by a respectable number of fellow medical professionals and social justice advocates, was suddenly inundated with tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of views. People shared it with furious captions. "This is elder abuse, pure and simple. Find these monstrous children. This is what happens when a society stops valuing its elders." My story, my quiet, private humiliation, had become a public parable, a lightning rod for a collective outrage that I had no idea existed. Local news outlets picked it up. They ran segments about the Christmas angel doctor, who was exposing the hidden scandal of holiday elder abandonment. They interviewed experts from senior advocacy groups, who spoke of this being a tragically common but rarely discussed phenomenon. The story was everywhere. My city was buzzing with it. And then the support began to pour in. The social worker from the hospital, a wonderful woman named Mrs. Davis, called to check on me. "Cynthia," she said, her voice full of a new respect, "your story has opened a floodgate. Our office has been receiving calls all morning from people wanting to help. We've had offers of meal deliveries for you, of legal aid, of companionship. There's a local church group, not even your own, that wants to organize a real Christmas dinner in your honor. I was stunned into silence, tears welling in my eyes. These people, these strangers, they didn't see me as a burden, as someone in the way. They saw me as a mother, a grandmother, a respected elder who had been grievously wronged. Their collective compassion was a powerful antidote to my children's callousness. The most significant call came from a pro bono law firm that specialized in elder law. "We saw the story," a young, energetic lawyer told me. "And while we know the doctor kept it anonymous, the details strongly suggest a case of actionable neglect and emotional distress. If you are that woman, and if you would be willing, we would be honored to represent you free of charge, to ensure your rights and your assets are protected from those who would take advantage of you." My children, Derek and Tasha, were still silent. I could only imagine the dawning horror in their house as they too surely saw the story taking over their social media feeds. The anonymous retired principal would be instantly recognizable to anyone who knew them. Their perfect, curated world was about to be rocked by a tidal wave of public shame. They had tried to make me invisible, but a brave young doctor had put me on the biggest stage imaginable. My story was no longer just mine. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt discarded, devalued, or forgotten. And it was far from over. The digital firestorm ignited by Dr. Barnes's viral video soon erupted into a real-world inferno for my son, Derek, and his wife, Tasha. They had, in their arrogance, believed their cruel act of abandonment was a private, manageable affair. They had no defense against the court of public opinion, a court that had just found them guilty in a swift and merciless trial by social media. It began with whispers in their affluent suburban circles. Friends who had attended their Christmas dinner, the one held in my home while I sat on a gurney in the ear, started connecting the dots. The retired principal in the viral story. The strange absence of the family matriarch at her own holiday feast. Derek's evasiveness when asked where I was. The puzzle pieces clicked into place and the picture they formed was ugly. I heard from my sister Martha that the fallout was immediate and brutal. Tasha, whose entire identity was built on her carefully curated image as a sophisticated hostess and community figure, was suddenly a pariah. Friends stopped returning her calls. The other mothers at her children's exclusive private school would turn their backs, whispering when she arrived for pickup. The charity board she so proudly sat on suddenly requested a leave of absence, pending a review of her family situation. Her world of polite smiles and social climbing had crumbled, revealing the rotten foundation beneath. Derek faced his own reckoning. His firm, a high-pressure sales environment where a family man image was a valuable asset, was suddenly buzzing with the scandal. His colleagues, the important ones he had been so desperate to impress, now looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. His boss, a man known for his own strong family values, reportedly called him into his office for a serious discussion about character and judgment. The promotion Derek had been so certain of was, I heard, suddenly, indefinitely, off the table. They were trapped. Their names hadn't been used in the initial video, but the story was so specific, so resonant, that it had become an open secret in their community. They couldn't deny it without confirming their identity as the monstrous children in the story. They couldn't stay silent as the speculation and condemnation mounted. Their first move was a panicked, desperate attempt at damage control. They tried to call me. Not to apologize, I was sure, but to demand I do something, say something to make it all go away. But I was ready for them. On the advice of the pro bono lawyer I had now officially retained, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Reed, I had changed my phone number. My old number now went to a voicemail I no longer checked. Blocked from reaching me directly, they showed up at my house unannounced. I saw their expensive SUV pull up through my living room window. I did not answer the door. I simply watched as they stood on my porch, ringing the bell, their faces a mixture of fury and desperation. After 10 minutes of their fruitless efforts, they finally retreated, defeated. My quiet little bungalow, the one they had so easily abandoned me from, had become my fortress, a place they could no longer breach. The viral story had also brought unexpected consequences for them. It wasn't just about social shame. The social worker from the hospital, Mrs. Davis, had, as promised, filed an official report with the county's Adult Protective Services, citing my case as a clear example of elder abandonment and emotional abuse. An official investigation was launched. Derek and Tasha were now facing not just the judgment of their neighbors, but the scrutiny of the state. I learned from my lawyer that they were contacted by an investigator. They tried to spin their web of lies again, that I was confused, that it was all a misunderstanding, that they had been deeply concerned for my health. But this time they weren't dealing with a lone, weary police officer in a busy ER. They were dealing with a specialized investigator who had my full lucid statement, the hospital's records of my 9-hour stay for no medical reason, and a file thick with printouts of the thousands of comments from the public demanding justice on my behalf. Their caring son act, the one they had performed so convincingly for so long, had crumbled under the weight of their own cruelty, amplified by the power of a single viral video. They had wanted me to be invisible, a quiet, forgotten old woman. Instead, my story, my pain, was now the most talked about scandal in town. They had tried to put me in the way of a hospital's important work, but in doing so, they had placed themselves directly in the path of a public reckoning they could not escape. Their perfect holiday had become the beginning of their year-long nightmare. The weeks following the viral firestorm were a period of profound transformation for me. The investigation by Adult Protective Services, fueled by the public outcry and the meticulous report from the hospital social worker, concluded that I had indeed been a victim of emotional abuse and willful neglect. While the legal consequences for Derek and Tasha were not criminal charges, the laws around emotional abandonment being frustratingly complex, the official report was a damning indictment of their character. My lawyer, Evelyn Reed, used it as powerful leverage. Faced with a potential civil lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and with their reputations already in tatters, Derek and Tasha quickly agreed to a legally binding settlement, drafted by Evelyn. It wasn't about money for me. It was about power and peace. The agreement stipulated that they were to have no contact with me unless I initiated it. It gave me the right to refuse them entry to my property at any time. And it included a clause where they formally acknowledged their grievous error in judgment on Christmas Day. It was a forced legal apology, but it was in writing, a permanent record of their wrongdoing. Their lives continued to unravel. Derek was ultimately passed over for his promotion, his character issues, now a permanent stain on his record at the firm. Tasha, stripped of her social standing, became a recluse in her own oversized house, her charity boards having permanently distanced themselves. Their perfect life, built on a foundation of superficiality and disrespect, had proven to be a house of cards. But my story wasn't just about their downfall. It was about my own quiet, unexpected rebirth. The viral video, the one that had started as a source of such deep shame, had opened up a new world to me. The community support was overwhelming. The small local Seniors Action Coalition asked me to be their honorary spokesperson. Me, Cynthia Jenkins, a retired principal who had thought her life was quietly winding down. I started speaking at small community gatherings, at churches, at senior centers. I didn't have to raise my voice. I just told my story. I spoke of the quiet, creeping loneliness that so many elders face, of the fear of becoming a burden, of the profound pain of being dismissed by the very children you have poured your life into. My story, my truth, resonated deeply. Other men and women began to share their own stories, their own quiet heartbreaks. My small, personal humiliation had become a catalyst for a larger conversation about dignity, respect, and the value of our elders. The crowdfunding that had been started by strangers was another miracle. It grew into a substantial sum. I didn't need it for myself. My pension was sufficient for my modest needs. So, after consulting with my lawyer and the hospital social worker, we did something wonderful with it. We established Cynthia's Christmas Fund, a permanent endowment managed by the hospital's foundation, dedicated to providing transportation, comfort packages, and companionship for any elderly patient who finds themselves alone in the hospital during the holidays. My story of abandonment would now ensure that others would not have to suffer the same fate. 1 year later, on Christmas Eve, my house was filled with a different kind of warmth. Not with my biological family, but with my new one. Dr. Aisha Barnes, the young doctor who had started it all, was there, along with Mrs. Davis, the social worker, and a few of my new friends from the Seniors Action Coalition. We weren't having a lavish feast, just simple, delicious food and warm, genuine conversation. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mom." It was Derek. His voice was quiet, hesitant, stripped of all its former arrogance. I just wanted to say, I saw the article about your Christmas fund. What you're doing is It's a good thing, Mom. He paused. I wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas. Thank you, Derek, I said, my voice calm, neutral. I wish you peace. And I meant it. I hung up the phone, a quiet sense of closure settling over me. The rage was gone. The deep, aching hurt had softened into a scar, a part of my story, but no longer its defining chapter. My revenge wasn't in my son's ruin, but in my own resilience. It was in the community I had found, the purpose I had discovered. They had tried to make me invisible, to put me in the way. But in doing so, they had inadvertently placed me at the center of a story far bigger than their own petty concerns. I raised my glass of sparkling cider, my new friends smiling around my small festive table. My life was not what I had planned. It was something different, something stronger, something more meaningful.